everybody. My name is Greg Loeffler. I am here to talk about troubleshooting in complex environments faster with Splunk, and also with Cisco. I feel like a lot of you may be here to talk about sort of the Cisco acquisition. What does that mean? What is new with Splunk? So I'm also going to talk about that. As part of this presentation, I'm also going to go through a demo of Splunk Observability Cloud, show you some things that you may not have seen in that product before, including our AI assistant that is in private preview. So if you want to check that out, make sure to stay. So thank you all for coming and joining us here in the full room. I appreciate you staying. And I'm going to go ahead and jump right into it. We're going to talk about three things today. One is sort of an overview of observability. Again, you probably have heard this before, but I think that Splunk has an approach for observability that is a little bit different than some of the rest of the industry, so I do want to talk about that. And then I'm going to show you the troubleshooting demo with Splunk Observability Cloud. And then I'm going to talk about how Splunk and Cisco work together, how we're better together, some of the new things that are available as part of the Cisco family. And we'll also have time for some questions at the end. So at the end, if you have a question, raise your hand. We'll bring a mic over to you, and we'll get that going. So we want to start off by talking about what it's like to troubleshoot. Right now, most people rely on what we call scattered visibility. There are lots of different components that make up an application and that make up a system. You have logs, you have metrics, you have traces, you have networking, you have your applications, you have third-party frameworks, you have JavaScript, you have APIs, you have databases, you have cloud services, you probably have multiple cloud services. And figuring out what's going on in all of those places and all those things is sometimes the hardest thing to do when you are trying to troubleshoot problems. Like I was an SRE for a while, 7-8 years, and one of the things that was the hardest thing for me to find out was where is the thing broken, Like you get a page in the middle of the night, your CEO takes a screenshot of something and forwards it to ops at company name with question mark, And you're like, great, that's helpful. Figuring out where things are broken is the hardest part, Like figuring out in your microservice application, that part of the stack alone, you have hundreds of microservices and even a pretty simple app nowadays. But then you also have to think about your network stack, your databases, your storage, your owned and unowned network stack, So if you're using a cloud provider, their network stack. Lots of places where issues can happen. The ever popular DNS, could be a problem. And there's lots of things that really right now, every one of these things on the slide, a different team is responsible for, Different people have to look at this, different people have to figure out what's going on. And so if you are the poor, intrepid SRE who's trying to fix these problems, you probably don't even have access to all this stuff, Like you might have access to, say, like CloudWatch or whatever your cloud platform's observability platform is. You can look at logs, you can look at things in there, but you probably don't have access to the database logs, You don't have access to the network equipment logs, if there are any. You don't even have access to metrics or other things that might help you figure out where the problem is. Basically, your visibility is really narrow, You got the blinders on, and I'm from Kentucky, so I'm going to use a horse analogy, But you've got the blinders on, you literally can't see what's going on outside. And this is a problem, If you think about any application, the cloud native ones especially, like there are more components being added all the time. And every time there's a change in any one of these things, it can cause impact to your customers. And if you are good at your job, and you're here, so there's a pretty good chance that you're good at your job, you really care about your customer's experience, You don't want them to experience downtime. You don't want them to have problems. You don't want them to not be able to buy your widgets or tweet or buy tickets or whatever it is that you do, You want to make sure that they can do that. And so having visibility into all of these things is really important when stuff starts changing, If we could just build a system once and then never change it ever again, it would work, It'd be great. We wouldn't have to worry about anything. We just have it, ship it, and then we could all go retire, But the business always wants to change stuff, There's new features, there's new things that we want to sell, there's new capabilities, so there's always going to be new things. Additionally, we can find other changes that are unexpected code paths get exercised, or somebody attacks your infrastructure, or both of those things happen at the same time, And these changes also cause problems. The main point is it's really difficult to actually get visibility into what's going on in your entire application because they're so complicated and because they're so difficult to figure out what's going on. So because of this, business context gets lost. One of the things that I see all the time is that people that are starting to like embrace observability and are starting to try to operate more reliably will say, all right, I set up a dashboard and I've got 15,000 alerts and anything I can think of will fire off an alert. Great, right? Like most of those alerts are probably not actionable, right? Like if you're running an on-prem infrastructure and the disks in all of your machines are 85% full, okay, who cares? Like you paid for those disks, you should probably use them. If people are still able to do your important business thing, it doesn't really matter that the disks are 85% full, right? Conversely, if the disks are empty, but you still can't check out, your customers still can't do the thing, this is a much bigger problem, right? And you can say, oh, no alerts are going off, everything's cool. Everything's not cool, right? If the business thing that you're trying to do can't be done, and your observability tool doesn't care about business context, you don't know if your customers are able to check out or if they're able to log in or register or do whatever the thing is that they want to do, right? If you've ever been on call, right, you've dealt with this, right? You'll see something happens and the alert storm shows up, right? And there's 7 screens full of problems and everything is going off. And generally the root cause is like one thing, right? It's like somebody backed over the fiber with a backhoe and now the fiber's cut. Well, every single network equipment is gonna throw off alerts because you can't reach it, right? Those alerts are basically all not actionable, right? Like there's one thing that's broken, not 3,000. And until you figure out what the one thing is you need to pay attention to, you're wasting time. Your customers are having a bad experience. They're going online and tweeting and complaining and they're calling your customer service line and it's a bad day, right? So what you really need to care about are critical alerts that matter for your business, right? Most observability tools don't really care about this, right? They're built for the old school world where this fragile thing is broken. Let me point and laugh that the thing is broken. That's not really helpful to you. Again, what's helpful is logins are normally this high and take this long, and now they're not, right? And like whether that's because the login service is having a problem, whether because there's a network error, whether that's because the whole country's trying to log in at the same time because Taylor Swift wrote about you in a song, like whatever that is, you need to know that that's happening, and that's a lot more important than the specific components that make up that alert, right? You really need to be able to go beyond your basic infrastructure and application metrics, right? You need to be able to go beyond, this API is taking longer to respond than it should. Instead, it's more like, how does a slowdown on my website impact my purchases per second, right? Because again, if it's today, actually, it's still Monday. So if it's today, e-commerce maybe is a little busy. If you run an e-commerce site and you're here, congratulations, you're not in the middle of an on-call escalation, so that's a plus. But if you are dealing with an e-commerce site today, maybe your transactions are taking a little longer than they do on other days, right? It's a peak traffic day, you've got a lot of people checking out at the same time. Are they still completing? Right? Or is your cart abandonment rate increasing more than it should? Like, you need to be able to pay attention to those things, right? And most people, when I ask them what are observability metrics you care about, half the people go, metrics, traces, and logs, which aren't metrics, but okay. And then the other half are like, oh, disk-based network utilization, red metrics, maybe. Nobody ever says business metrics, right? Nobody says, how many widgets are we shipping, right? How many people are checking out? How many registrations do we have? That's what matters. That's why we're running these systems in the first place. It's so that people can get the thing done that they need to get done. So you need a tool that pays attention to that and that uses that as part of how the tool works. The last thing I'll say about this slide is that there are, whether we like to admit this or not, certain customers are more important maybe than other customers, right? There are, in most businesses, there are customers that are your regular customers, right? Or your big spenders, or both. And you really want to know if those people are having a bad experience that maybe the other customers aren't, right? Let's say that your marketing department, and I work in marketing, so I'm allowed to bag on them a little bit. Let's say your marketing department sends out a campaign, and they didn't pay attention to the URL, and there's an extra space at the end or something silly like that, right? And you send this out to all of your big spenders, and you say, it's Cyber Monday. We're going to give you 50% off, and come buy everything you want to buy. And people try to click on the email. It doesn't work, it doesn't go anywhere because there's an error in the URL, right? You really want to find out really fast that these big spender customers are having problems accessing your site, right? You want to see that those 404 rates are really high for that segment so that you can figure out, hey, how do I fix that for these customers? How do I get them spending that money? And most of the time, most observability tools, can't tell you that information, and the ones that can aren't set up to do that. And it really makes a difference to be able to segment your customers by all sorts of things, right? But to be able to see how things differentially affect different types of customers. So there's a little bit of a pun on this slide, unintentionally, where we say observability must cover multiple dimensions. Dimensions are, well, metadata attributes that are attached to an observability piece of data, so you can say, like, this is running on version whatever of the application. That's a dimension. So multiple dimensions, like there's multiple things you need to look at, but also you can attach a bunch of dimensions to your metadata. That's how you do all the cool business stuff that I was just mentioning. But really, what the point of this slide is to say that observability platforms have to be able to cover your whole estate, which is, I think, an older school term, but is valid, of like what you have running. So you need to be able to look at your traditional applications, your 3-tier monolith legacy applications that everybody has and that aren't going to go away, right? Like they generally fulfill some critical part of your business need. They are there because they work. There is a certain large e-commerce platform that for a while ran their entire site as a monolithic binary that I won't mention, but like there's lots and lots of these kind of applications that exist, and you need to be able to pay attention to them in the same places where you look at all of your cool, hip, modern stuff, right? So your cloud native applications running in Kubernetes, like your mobile application, for example, or your new front end for your website or all that sort of stuff, you need to be able to see these in the same place. Right? Fundamentally, they are affecting the same system. They're affecting the same thing that your customers care about, so you need to be able to see those all together. And then you also need to be able to include the stuff that runs on-premise, right? It's, again, like the dream of everybody to say, we threw away all of our on-premise infrastructure and we moved to the cloud. Has anybody ever gotten rid of every single legacy system in a cloud migration? There's one hand up. All right. I want to talk to you after, so we can learn about that. But generally speaking, right, like there is always some things left over, and you need to be able to see them all together with your new stuff. But also, you need to be able to look at things that are across multiple cloud providers, right? Maybe at AWS reInvent, this isn't the best thing to say, but generally you want to be diversified in where you deploy your stuff, right? You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket for a lot of reasons, but generally you want to be able to say, like, let's have some backups or some alternatives. If something happens, we can maybe move some traffic to a different cloud provider, or maybe one provider has better availability in a region that we really care about, and we want to have some things there. The point is, you probably are going to have stuff running in multiple cloud providers. You're going to have stuff running in your on-premise environment. You're going to have stuff running from your on-premise environment that calls out to cloud providers. And again, you really do not want to have 27 monitoring tabs open whenever something goes wrong, right? First of all, you may not even have access to all that stuff, right? So like if you're trying to troubleshoot a production outage and you eventually trace it down to a service running in GCP and you don't have access to the GCP console, well, let me find somebody that does. Let me start the war room and call everybody and pull people in, right? Like this makes the problem take longer to resolve, makes your MTTRs longer, makes your customers unhappy, makes your business people unhappy, right? So being able to see everything in one place is kind of the dream, right? Where you can see all the infrastructure that you have, all the applications you have, how they all talk to each other, and see them no matter where they're running makes it a lot faster to solve problems and to keep your customers happier. And then finally, you really have to think about networking as well, right? And again, we joke all the time about when a problem happens, it's kind of past the hot potato of whose problem is it, and the first place everybody throws it is network, and it's like, oh, something's broken in the network. I don't know what, figure it out. That doesn't really work anymore, right? Like a lot of the time, if you're running in the cloud, you don't really have a network person to throw the potato to, right? Like there's the infrastructure set up by your cloud provider, and there's nobody to call and yell at if it's not working, right? But you need to be able to figure out where it's broken. And this applies to both your network, like your owned network, for your on-premise stuff, for your own routers and switches and gateways and all that sort of equipment, but also to stuff like external CDNs, DNS providers, JavaScript frameworks that you may embed into your site. Like all of this stuff really matters to your user experience, right? And again, if you think about any sort of e-commerce transaction, like there's probably not an e-commerce site today that's running without embedding a third-party JavaScript framework, at least at checkout, for PCI compliance, lots and lots of other reasons. But like, if the CDN that hosts that JavaScript goes down, your dashboards are all going to be green, right? Like, you don't know anything about that. It's just some CDN's broken. But your customers are certainly going to know when they can't check out and when they can't type in their credit card numbers or when they get declined or when there's other problems. So wouldn't it be nice if you could have access and visibility into that third-party CDN, into those JavaScript applications, and know what's going on with that? So you really need visibility into the whole world of your user's experience and your applications and your infrastructure and your network all in one place. It's easy, right? That's why we're all here. So we've really thought about this, and we think that one of the things that is important for anybody that's planning an observability journey to have is to have a unified vision and a shared vision for what observability can do for you and for your customers. And we really consider observability as something that helps ensure the resilience of digital systems and reduce the human toil of operating them by letting software do more heavy lifting to identify problems, find root causes, and take corrective action. Right, so if we break this down a little bit, I'm not going to break it down a ton, but my favorite part of this is reduce the human toil of operating systems. I was an SRE for a really long time. I have very, very not fond memories of trying to troubleshoot systems and trying to do a lot of toilsome work to figure out what's going on. And spending time and spending money on observability systems can really help the people that solve problems for you solve them faster by letting software do what the software was written to do. And why we have software when we pay all this money for software is to make our lives easier, right? The whole goal is to make it so that we don't have to do as much, we don't have to sweat, we don't have to wake up at 3 in the morning and deal with the problem. So we really, when you think about observability, what you want it to do is to help you ensure the resilience of your digital systems. So like, does it work? Can it keep working if there is a problem? And if it can't keep working, how quickly can you fix it without bothering a human too much? And so we really want to let software do a lot of this work. Software can help us identify problems. Is something broken, right? It can help us find the root causes. Why is it broken? Where is it broken? And then to take corrective action, right? Like, where in the logs is this that you can figure out what to do to fix it? Or can we maybe fix it automatically? Could we do a webhook into your CI system and roll back a release that we saw impacted some sort of customer metric? We can do that, right? We have plenty of customers that do, and it's really great to say, it's kind of like a thought exercise. Like, if you did a release that didn't receive any customer traffic, did you actually have an outage, right? Like, if it was broken, but you weren't routing any customers to it, was your MTTR 0, right? I mean, it was never actually broken. But this is, we can joke about that, but it's something that if you have a well-defined observability system, it really helps you deal with these problems in a way that does not burn yourself out, that does not make you have to be the one that's figuring out where things are broken. Like, the computer can tell us, right? So why don't we just ask it, right? There's no point in having us do a bunch of manual work when the computers know what's going on. So I want to show you about a 10-minute demo of Splunk Observability Cloud. What we're going to do in this demo is we're going to solve the problem in 2 different ways. So we're going to solve it sort of like the traditional way, where we look through the user interface and we click on stuff and we dig through and dive through and find out what the problem is. And then we're going to solve it with the AI assistant, right? And we're going to let you see how quickly you can do it in both ways and what sort of information you get from it. So I'm going to go ahead and start this. This is available on our YouTube channel, so if I missed something or if you want to see it again, feel free to go on the YouTube channel and you can watch it. But what we're doing first here is we're just logging into Splunk Observability Cloud and showing you an overview of the application. This is what you see when you first log in. And the first thing that you're doing is we're selecting an environment from that dropdown. You can use this to separate things like production, QA, staging, dev, that sort of thing, right? But in this particular example, we have an environment called Online Boutique US, because that's the one that we're running the demo in. And you can see that first we're going to mouse over a couple of these graphs here. This first one is showing you the top services by error rate. And you can see there's one service that's way up high, the light blue service. It's called payment service. And it's clearly having a bad day over the last couple of hours. We can change this time window if we want to, but it's been having a bad day for a while. So bad on us for our alerting being so slow. But you can also see we have top business workflows, top latency, and all that sort of stuff. But we're going to start troubleshooting on what's called the service map. So this service map is a overview and representation of your application. So on the service map, you can see all the services that are involved. You can also see things that are called inferred services. So if you look at the right-hand side of this diagram, you'll see there's some dotted outline services. Those are inferred services. But where we're at first is showing you between these various services, you can see the latency between them. The average latency is in the middle. You can also see where there are problems by looking for the giant angry red dot on the payment service that tells you the payment service is having a problem. And then payment service reaches out to something called Buttercup Payments. Buttercup Payments is an inferred service. You can see because it has the dotted outline, and when we moused over it, it said inferred service. But Buttercup Payments is something like a third-party payment gateway, right? We don't run code in our payment gateway, but we do know we send HTTP requests to it. We know how long they take. We know what error code we get. So we can infer there is a service there. But we're going to look at the service that calls that service first. So we clicked on payment service, and now on the right-hand side, you can see there's all sorts of metrics, as your rate, error, and duration things. And then we're going to look at what's called Tag Spotlight. Tag Spotlight lets us take all those dimensions I mentioned earlier and lets you figure out what's different in this service by those tags, right? So in this example, right now, this isn't the best example for this screen because there's only one box showing up, so we'll scroll down in a second. But what you can see here is that we've split up this by lots of different things. So we can see by the customer tier, we can separate by the version numbers, we can separate by HTTP code, we can sort this out by lots of different things, and we can mouse over them and see how they're different. The request rate, the error rate, the duration is different by those things. So we can see for this particular version or for this particular customer type, what's going on with them. Where are they seeing problems? So this is software. If you have ever deployed software ever in your life, you probably have realized that changing software may be the cause of the problem. And if we zoom in here and we look, yeah, probably. Version 350.9 has no errors. Version 350.10 has every single request failing. So let's roll that back, and there we go. We solved the problem, right? Like, it was easy for us to find out very quickly what was going on. We saw right here 350.10 was broken, 350.9 is fine. And that's it, we can call it a day, right? Right? No, we don't want to call it a day. Why is 350.10 broken, right? What's wrong with it? Why can we just, willy-nilly just start rolling stuff back, right? We want to be able to figure out what's going on, particularly for that version. So, in a moment, we're going to scroll down and we're going to look at the related content tabs at the bottom. So I'll go ahead and spoil this before the animation gets there. But you see we have infrastructure and we have logs. So from infrastructure, we can jump over to the Kubernetes cluster the payment service is running on, and we could look at the nodes and pods and all that sort of stuff. We can also go to the logs and look at the logs for this service. Now, because we do see this is isolated to one particular version, it makes more sense to look at the logs, right? Like, the Kubernetes infrastructure probably isn't the problem. So we're going to look at the logs, and we're going to click on that, and it will jump over directly into the logs, already filtered out by this service. So it's keeping that context as we go to look at the logs in Splunk Core. And this is in real time, by the way. We didn't speed this up or anything. This is how long it takes. So we have all the information here. So we have all the logs. Again, we really only want to see the stuff that didn't work. It's not really helpful for us to see the ones that were successful. So we can either sort on that left-hand column, or we can add a filter. So we're going to add a filter. So we click on Add Filter. We're going to scroll down to Severity. And then we're going to pick just ones that are errors. And then once this reloads, we'll be able to see just the errors. And then we can click on one, and it will tell us what's going on. Now, if you can read the screen already, you can probably already see the problem, but we'll go ahead and show it. So if you see up at the very top, the text is saying that this failed payment processing through Buttercup Payments because of an invalid API token, and it logs the API token. It's probably a bad idea, but, but it logs the API token, and you can see that the API token starts with test, so this is probably a problem because I doubt the production endpoint is happy with us sending it a test API token. You can also see all the other metadata for the log. You can see what host it was coming from. You can see the HTTP code. You can see the severity of the log. You can see the date and timestamps. You can also see the trace correlation, so if we wanted to jump into the full APM transaction that led to this, we could go do that. But really, we have the information we need now, right? Like somebody committed the test API token into the version of the payment service. We need to roll that back, or we need to change the token to the production one and fix it forward. One of those two things are what we need to do. So that was the old way of doing it, the more manual way, which is still probably a lot faster than I think people were expecting it to be. You can still solve these problems really quickly using the service map, using Tag Spotlight. It's a really fast way to find out what's going on. But it probably would be faster if we could just ask somebody else to tell us what's going on. So in a moment, we're going to jump over and we're going to use the AI assistant for observability. So if we click on that little icon up in the corner, this brings up our AI assistant for observability. And what we do with this is we can type in natural language queries. It's a really awkward way to say that, isn't it? We can talk like we're talking to a coworker, right? I heard the payment service is having issues in the online boutique environment. Can you tell me what's going on? We did speed this up. It's like a minute, I want to say, without the speed up. So we did speed this up a little bit, but what this is doing is it's actually using your data from your environment in real time to figure out what's going on. And so it runs through a bunch of queries and it figures out some of the things that are problematic. So first, there's a high error rate. Yep, we knew that, that's why we asked you. But at first it tells you that there's a high error rate. Then it tells you that there's some latency issues. Then the next thing that it says is that there's a common error, right? So there's a lot of 403s happening in payment service. So that's, again, a good thing for us to investigate, right? Something we might want to check out. And then if we look at number 4, it says, oh, well, these requests in common, what they have in common is that they're all saying they have they're invalid requests. And then the real winner here is that we also say, these results are isolated to version 350.10. So we didn't even have to ask it. We didn't have to have any supposition of what's wrong. All we had to say was, something's broke, help. And it helps, and it tells you payment service 350.10. That's it. That's all the troubleshooting you need to do, right? But again, well, why? Right? What's wrong with 350.10? So we're going to say, could you check the logs for payment service? And again, this is how you would talk to a coworker. It's like, well, could you go look in the logs? And so we'll ask our coworker, our Splunk AI that I don't think has a name yet, so maybe we'll name it, but for now, we'll ask Splunk AI, which can go through and look at the logs. And it does take a little bit longer to look through the logs. So I think this one was a little bit like 90 seconds or so without the speed up. So it's looking through the logs. And then it gives an exemplar log first of here's something that we think is the cause. And if you scroll up, you'll see the exemplar that it showed you is failed payment processing through Buttercup payments, invalid API token, test whatever. So again, in less than 3 minutes, without knowing a single thing about this application, no idea what it does, no idea where it's running, how it's deployed. It could be running on the intern's desk. It could be running in EKS and have 75,000 nodes. We have no clue, right? All we knew is something's broke. Tell me what's broken. Tell me why it's broken, and we were able to figure that out. So if you think through this for a few seconds, like the real power of observability is having all of this data in one place, right? But the problem with that is it's a lot of data, right? Like how many of you have felt overwhelmed? You log into an observability platform and you see there's hundreds of services, there's thousands of metrics, there's boxes and hexagons and bar charts and lines all over the place. And it doesn't really help you figure out where to look, right? And the bigger problem is I have all this data, I have all this powerful stuff. How do I use it? Like, I have the best magnifying glass in the world, but I'm trying to look at this room, right, and find a single pixel on the floor. And so it's like, all right, well, which quadrant of the room should I start in? You don't even have that information. You just know somewhere on this blue floor, there is a single red pixel. And if you find it, you solve all the problems. And if you don't, then you go out of business. Right? And like being able to figure out where to look is the main advantage of using an observability platform. But what is really powerful with Splunk's platform is that we are able to integrate all of the parts of your application that I talked about earlier. So in addition to your APM applitions, like your homegrown applications, your off-the-shelf applications, you also can look at your infrastructure, your on-prem infra, your Kubernetes clusters, your Docker Swarm. Is anybody still using that? But we have support for that. However you have your apps deployed, you can see the infrastructure they're running on. You can also see what's going on in your users' browsers on their phones using RUM, right? So you can find out if that third-party JavaScript is broken. And you can hopefully find out before it means your people can't check out, before there are other problems. And then you also have synthetic monitoring, which is, to me, like the best way to get started with observability. And the way that it works is you set up a synthetic test to simulate a user transaction. So whatever is important to you, let's say it's sending messages, right? So like you would set up a synthetic task that logged into your application, pulled up the send a message form, typed a sample message, sent it, and made sure it got received on the other end, right? You could run this every so often from a bunch of places all around the world with a bunch of different browsers and make sure that it works. So that if at some point it doesn't work for a specific browser, on a specific phone, from a specific part of the world, that you can figure that out before your customers start to figure it out, right? And if you think about that, when a synthetics alert fires, like that's action, that's now, right? That is something that is happening, that is your customers should be doing, isn't working. And so go figure out what's going on. With Splunk synthetic monitoring, you can see, here's a synthetic test, here's the browser that was running, or the app. You can actually see a video of what happened. But then you can also click through into the APM and see the backend calls that were made, right? What services were affected? What versions were those running? What hosts were they on? Where were they deployed? And it's really, really fast to find problems. And again, the goal of this is all to make sure that your business operates in the way that you need it to, and that your customers are happy with the stuff that they get, right? So using observability, adopting observability, helps you keep your business running. It helps your on-call nights not be as terrible, and it helps you see everything that's going on, no matter how complex your world is. And like, your worlds aren't getting any less complicated, right? Like, did anybody destroy more stuff than they deployed last year? No. It's not a hand up, because I was pretty safe with that one. I thought the first one I was pretty safe with too, but there is always a thing that complexity always increases. It's literally a law of the universe. It's entropy, right? Like things are just going to get more complicated as stuff goes on. This also applies to your infrastructure and your applications. So everything you can add that makes that easier can help you deal with that, right? Like it's really, really stressful to say, yesterday when I looked at this service, it had 3 upstreams and 2 downstreams. Today, when I look at this service, there are 14 upstreams and 9 downstreams. What the heck happened, right? And the person that did that may be in a different time zone. They may have been 10 people that did that. It's not like you can just call them up and ask them, right? It's, they're on vacation. They're somewhere where you can't reach them, but you need to fix that stuff. So having observability lets you see the current state of your entire world at a glance, and it makes it really, really fast and really easy to solve your problems. So for the third part of this, I want to talk a little bit about Splunk plus Cisco. I feel like most folks know about Splunk, most folks know about Cisco, but especially in the observability world, a lot of people are like, Greg, what happened? This doesn't make any sense. Why did Cisco buy Splunk? What's the deal here? So I want to talk about some of the things that we're going to get through the acquisition and talk about some of the advantages that we have as we work together. So we really have the most complete observability solution now as one unified company, right? The biggest thing that we give you is the ability to unlock complete coverage of everything, right? Splunk Observability Cloud was written for cloud-native microservice Kubernetes applications, right? You can, of course, use it for on-prem applications, for legacy apps, for that sort of thing. But it wasn't the best product for those types of applications. AppDynamics which previously was a Cisco product and is now a Splunk product, was, right? AppDynamics was the best APM for 3-tier applications, bar none, right? And now we have access to that as part of Splunk, right? So if you have those custom business applications that are really important, and you probably do, right? Being able to integrate that data from AppDynamics into all the visibility and the enhanced user experience tools that you get from Splunk Observability Cloud means that you get complete coverage over all of your applications, no matter how they're deployed, right? So any environment, any stack, running anywhere, and again, seeing it all in one place. You also get really powerful real-time analytics to figure out what's going on faster, right? Like, the biggest thing that we have customers tell us is, I like being able to solve my problems. I wish I could do it faster, right? My MTTD is too long. My MTTR is too long. And one of the things that you're able to do with Cisco and with Splunk is to integrate your network equipment metrics, right? Your traces from your third-party apps, your SAP, part of your business processes, right? These were all things that Splunk alone didn't really have access to before, right? And with the integration of AppDynamics and Cisco's cloud observability portfolio, we do now have access into more of the overall business and more of the overall landscape. We also let you triage based on your business impact, which again is really, really important. And one of the cool things that I'm most excited about us borrowing from AppDynamics and putting into Splunk Observability Cloud are the concept of service scores, where we can see, like, this service is this healthy and it has this much impact on the rest of your services, right? So that at a glance, you can figure out which one of all these, there's 10 services that have angry red dots. Which one should I start with, right? Which one has the most impact to my business? Well, we can tell you that, and that's something that you can look at with business impact data now that we have that from Cisco AppDynamics. And then finally, controlling costs is always a big thing, right? The world-famous do more with less demand. We have a couple of features in Splunk Observability Cloud that we're excited to share with AppD customers, such as the AWS Cost Optimizer, which can look at your infrastructure and say, hey, you're running all of your instances on demand. That's silly. Don't do that. Like, here's some reserved instances you could consider, buy some spot instances, right? Like, do things that can lower your operations costs. And we're able to do that now for all types of applications and across a wide array of cloud providers, right? We're adding support for more of them as well. But also, like, it helps reduce the human cost of having to troubleshoot incidents, right? Like, engineers are not free, right? And the more time that you're spending as an engineer dealing with the slog of troubleshooting and triage, the less time you're spending developing new stuff, right? The less time you're spending learning, the less time you're spending making new features that deliver value to the business. It's a phrase I never thought I would say out loud, but it's true, right? Like, the goal of an engineer is to build stuff that helps the business do the business better, right? And the more time you're spending troubleshooting, the less time you're spending doing that, and the less time you're learning the cool new thing and playing with the new technology. So it has a lot of value for engineers as well as executives. So what is Splunk Observability? It's everything, I mean, of course, right? But the things that we provide are sort of around the circle here. And we start off at the very top with application performance monitoring, right? That's sort of the flagship, right? You look at an application, you figure out how it's performing, you figure out how it's working, you figure out what sort of impact it is having on your business, right? Then if we go over to the right, we'll go clockwise, infrastructure monitoring, right? So you do need to pay attention to the infrastructure. Even if you are using a managed Kubernetes provider, for instance, you still need to know if it's working, right? If it is Black Friday and you are unable to allocate new instances in your cloud provider because they're out, right? There are only so many computers. You want to know about that, right? You want to be able to fix that. So you need infrastructure monitoring as well. Next, we go to log analysis. Right, we're Splunk. We know about logs, right? Like, obviously, logs are critical. Logs tell you where problems are. Logs tell you why things are broken, right? They tell you how you can go in and fix them, and you really need that information, right? It's not enough to just have metrics that say, like, yep, the building's on fire. That is a metric. Fire equals 1, right? Like, well, where is the fire, right? Like, what was the cause of the fire? How was it detected? Like, those things are probably more useful to you than the fact that somewhere in the building there is a fire, right? So you need the logs. You need to be able to figure out why things are broken. Next, you have incident response. We call this on-call, right? But basically, you need something that can tell you when you're responding to an incident, where is it broken, and who is the right person to call, right? Like, if we all worked together at the same company, and this half of the room worked on one part of it, you all worked on another service, you worked on a third one, and you all worked on a fourth. If that service broke, should every single one of you be on a conference room call about that? No, right? Like, just the people who have the service that's broken should know about it. But you really need to have an incident response tool that can tell you, hey, this is the service that's having a problem, and according to the runbook, it goes to that team, so that we only wake up that team, and we only ruin that team's night. Sorry. But you need something that helps you respond to incidents faster and not drag in people who don't need to be drug in, but conversely, right, that gets the people who can solve the problem active and solving the problem faster. There is nothing more annoying to me from when I was an SRE of sitting on a war room call for hours and hours and hours while other people worked. And it's like, well, I can't hang up. I've got to be on the call. I know my service is not responsible for this, but, well, we got to be on the bridge. I have spent many a Christmas on a war room call, and like a good incident response tool would have fixed this. Right? So we don't give it a lot of shrift here. I talk about it a lot because I was an SRE, but like incident response is a really important part of your observability strategy. Right? You need to have a way to make sure that incident response is not painful. Then we talk about AI, ML, LLM observability. Hey, buzzword check, we did it. But this is important, right? Everybody is starting to adopt AI. Everybody is starting to adopt large language models. And you really want to be able to figure out, are we getting what we need to out of them, right? How many tokens a minute are we using? How much are we spending to do this? How long is it taking to generate these responses? Are our users rating these responses as helpful or not, right? We need to be able to figure out what's going on with those. This is still nascent, right? So like, I don't want to sell you that we've got an out-of-the-box AI LLM observability solution, but it is something people use us for. We're actively working on it. We know it's coming. And it's something that if you're planning an observability system, you should probably be planning for it because, like it or not, it's coming, right? Next, network monitoring, right? As part of Cisco, we were informed about the importance of network equipment and how vital it is and how much of a role it plays in observability. And so one of the things that we're adding to Splunk Observability is more support for Cisco's networking equipment and protocols, Cisco's collaboration stuff, basically Cisco's entire product line. We're making sure that we're integrating into Splunk Observability, but network monitoring for your network architecture, your own stuff, and again, for your unowned stuff, so you can figure out what's going on with your cloud providers, what's going on with third parties, what's going on with CDNs, DNS providers, JavaScript, JavaScript libraries, all that sort of stuff. You need to be able to see what's going on there as well, because it's a big part of your user experience. Business risk observability is a really cool thing that came to us from AppDynamics, and this is a way, again, to see two things. One is, how much of an impact does this service have on the business, right? And so is this something I need to pay attention to right now? And then also, what's the security posture of this service like, right? Like, are there active vulnerabilities in the code that's running? Are any of these actively being exploited? And we can tell you that too. And then, do these security problems have impacts to the actual overall business that you're operating, right? Because again, any code that's running on any network-connected system is eventually going to become insecure, right? There's going to be something that's discovered sometime down the road that finds a problem. And the only way you can operate a really secure system is to encase it in cement and drop it at the bottom of the ocean. And even then, the fish might get to it or something. But like, you need to be able to see, is this exploit actively being exploited? And is it something that is really going to impact my business if it does get exploited? And having this functionality really helps make it so that the last silo in observability, which I'm going to keep that in my back pocket for a talk, is like the one between security and the observability infrastructure team, right? A lot of the time, these folks do not talk to each other, right? You are not friends with the security folks, right? They have their own tools, they have their own way of solving problems. The observability people have their own tools and their own way of solving problems. This is bananas, like when you think about it, right? Like if you have a giant spike in traffic, okay, is that because you're being credential stuffed, right? Somebody got a dump of all your passwords and they're trying to log in as every customer? Is this because it's Black Friday and everybody wants to buy stuff? Is this because Beyonce went on a show and talked about how she uses your product, right? Like there's a million possible things that could cause this, but looking at them all in a vacuum is just really strange to me. So integrating security and having the security folks start to use the same tools and the same language as the observability folks, again, will help make this faster and better for everybody as time goes by. So it's something I'm really excited that we're going to be able to add. We also have AI ops support, so where this comes into play is helping you figure out, again, where is the thing broken? Where should I look? How can I start to fix it? And to do things like setting thresholds that make sense and that are smart, right? If you run a pizza place, then on a Sunday in February, your order count is probably going to be really, really high because there's a really big football game going on that day, right? But then the next week, your order count is going to be significantly lower. Is that something we should alert about? No, right? Like it's normal Sunday behavior. Like that Sunday was an anomaly. But being able to have a tool that can tell you, hey, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, this would have been fine. It was just that 1 week, and not alert you, again, makes your life a lot easier. So when we talk about AI ops, that's one of the tools that we're talking about, the other being our AI assistants and that sort of thing. And then finally, last but not least, digital experience monitoring. This is real user monitoring and synthetics, right? So this is looking at your customers' browsers, their phones, all that sort of stuff, and seeing what's going on with the JavaScript or the native code that's running on their devices, and then also doing synthetic checks to figure out, hey, before the users find it, let's find it ourselves. We have this cake diagram, I guess, that talks about how the various parts of the Splunk and Cisco cloud fit together. Really at the bottom, we have the Splunk platform, where our log data is stored and where it's essential to keep track of all of the data that makes up your business, right? All of the log information is stored in Splunk platform. And then we have AppDynamics and Observability Cloud in sort of the middle here, which collects trace data, metrics, and they do this from your cloud native applications and from your legacy applications and integrate that data all together. And then the overarching view of all of this is provided through IT Service Intelligence, which is at the top. This is really useful if you're an executive or if you love an executive and you want to show them a bunch of dashboards and things that tell them about the health of the business and that let them see, like, you know, how many widgets are we shipping and how is that affected by the latency in the checkout processor, right? Like you can show all of that in one place and aggregate all that information with ITSI. It's really, really powerful for business service monitoring. And if you want to be a good observability person, you should really care about the business, right? Because again, like I get the thing that helps you sleep at night is my service is okay. But like to move beyond, it really is like, how does my service contribute to the business? If my service isn't working, what's the impact on our customers? And thinking about it from that approach will make you a better engineer, but it'll also make your services more robust, your customers happier, all that sort of stuff. And then finally, there's a few things down at the bottom that I do want to mention. One of these is that Splunk is a recognized industry leader in observability. We've won leader placement in analyst reports. I think the last 12 in a row, we've been a leader placement in all the analyst reports, so we've got that going for us. We have lots of great customers, and we can talk about those afterwards of examples of customers who use our product line and all that sort of stuff. So this is some stuff that we've already delivered as part of our integration story, so we do want to talk about this a little bit. One of the first things we were able to deliver were AppDynamics logs, AppDynamics integration with Splunk Cloud. So if you have your logs stored in Splunk Cloud and you're monitoring your applications with AppDynamics, there is now a link inside AppDynamics that will take you to the correct Splunk logs page that matches that service. So instead of having to pull up and log into your Splunk Cloud instance and then run some SPL to find this service, there's just a button in AppD. You can just click and it hops over into Splunk and we'll show you that information. SSO between AppD and Splunk Cloud is coming soon. And then eventually we will have support to send data from AppDynamics into Splunk Cloud so that we can do more advanced analysis with it. We've also started to integrate AppDynamics and Observability Cloud, right? So one of the things that we're doing is unifying the look and feel. So if you were an existing Splunk Observability Cloud user, you may have noticed in that demo that I showed earlier, the UI is different. Actually, you may not have noticed that because the UI just changed. Like last week, I think we finally shipped that. But when I recorded the demo, the UI was different. This was because we're matching the look and feel of the other Cisco Observability applications and AppDynamics, again, to try to deliver a consistent look and feel across these apps so that if you're familiar with AppD, you can see stuff's in the same place in Splunk Observability Cloud. And of course, over time, we're going to be integrating more of the Observability Cloud capabilities into AppDynamics and vice versa. To be very explicit, AppDynamics is not going away. We are investing more into AppDynamics. We think it's really important as part of our overall portfolio because there are lots of critical applications that AppDynamics does a really good job with. So it's not going anywhere, but we're adding more support for Kubernetes, databases, stuff that Splunk Observability Cloud is really good at will be being added into AppD. And then we're also going to be adding real-time alerting and analytics for our digital experience monitoring capabilities from Splunk Observability Cloud into AppD as well. We have also added some support for AppDynamics events now to come into ITSI. So if there are things happening in AppDynamics, you can have those on your dashboards, on your business graphs, your service health scores, all the stuff that ITSI gives you. AppD is now a supported data source for that. We've already delivered that. And then we've also added you the ability to pull in AppD services and AppD APM metrics into ITSI for calculation of health scores. And then we are also adding support later on for Thousand Eyes, Meraki, a bunch of the other Cisco products. We started with AppD because it was an observability product, right? But we're going to be adding support for the rest of Cisco's product line very soon. Finally, OpenTelemetry is my favorite thing in the world. I'm a really big OpenTelemetry cheerleader, and Splunk Observability Cloud is OpenTelemetry native. There's not a Splunk agent, then you can also use OTel. Splunk Observability Cloud is OTel. That is our native data format. That's what we use. OpenTelemetry is the future of getting data into observability. You can ask anybody here, except for one company that I won't name, but there's one company here that does not agree. But everybody else has gotten on the train that OpenTelemetry is the future of observability, and we wanted to bring support for OpenTelemetry into AppDynamics, so we are bringing that in to AppDynamics. We're going to have first-class support for OTel in AppD. AppD did already ship some support for OpenTelemetry, but we're making it a lot more robust with the eventual goal of having OTel be the way to get data into all of the observability products, right? So including logging, right? We want to be able to support OTel into Splunk Core, into AppDynamics, and all that sort of stuff. I'm huge supporter of OTel. Splunk is a really big supporter of OTel. We have over 30 full-time employees who work on OpenTelemetry, so that's not just lip service, right? We devote a lot of resources to OpenTelemetry. We are the top contributor to OTel, and it's something that we really care about. So we wanted to make sure that our AppD customers understood, you're going to get that OTel goodness as well. We're really important on making sure that that's integrated into AppDynamics. So to wrap it up, why Cisco and Splunk for observability? There's 3 reasons. The first one is unified visibility, right, across all your environments, all your stacks, all the places where your stuff runs, including your customers' browsers, their phones, all those places. The second is earlier detection and investigation of business impacting issues, right? You need to know when stuff is broken before your customers know. And if you can't know before your customers, at least as quickly as possible after they know, you need to know so that you can fix those problems and get your business back on track. And then finally, better control of your data and your costs, right? One of the things that we see a lot from other vendors is install the magic, and the magic will do all the stuff, and you don't have to worry about it, which is great until you decide to go to a different vendor, and then the magic suddenly doesn't work anymore, and you have to go back and rip out all the magic and put in new stuff. With OpenTelemetry, that is the last time you will ever have to do that. So we think that's really cool because it's your data at the end of the day, right? You should be able to control what you do with it, where you send it. If you want to send it to multiple platforms, go for it. If you want to send some of it to a Glacier store because it's audit data, do that. It's your data. You should be able to figure out what you do with it. And this also has a lot of applications in the regulatory and compliance environment, especially for those of you that aren't American, right? A lot of places have more data for my country's customers has to stay in my country. Well, with OTel, you can make sure that that happens, right? You can show, we know this data is not going anywhere. It's staying in this country, and we can deal with it. The other thing is dealing with costs, right? I work for a vendor. Observability is expensive, can be expensive, let's say. And one of the ways that you can help cut down those costs is by sending the right kind of data and using filtering at the source so that you don't even send the data in the first place, right? But being able to use OTel's flexible processing capabilities and to be able to, again, say where you send certain types of data, and then once you've sent it in, how important it is, so that some of the data that's not as critical sort of gets put in a cheaper place to store, right? These are all capabilities that Splunk and Cisco have worked together on to make sure we are the best in class at. So that's the sell. Why Cisco and Splunk? That's the reason. So we really want you to remember that there are lots of great capabilities that all of our products have. And yes, it does seem like, why are you selling us 4 products when you could just sell us 1? Well, they do different stuff, right? And so over time, of course, we do plan to integrate these products more tightly and to have them all sort of help you solve your problems. But for right now, there are different things that these products are good at. So these are the best in class at these things, right? Splunk platform is the best log analytics platform. ITSI is the best business service monitoring platform. AppDynamics is the best self-hosted on-premise APM product, right? Observability Cloud's the best at APM for serverless, for microservices, for Kubernetes. So you can really get the best of everything from one vendor, one price list, one sales rep, right? It's a lot easier than having to deal with 14 different folks. So hey, that's it. You made it. I appreciate you all coming out. Please do come by our booth if you would like to learn more, of course. We have demos, we have opportunities. If you are just enamored with hearing me talk, I have theater sessions on troubleshooting the OpenTelemetry collector every day the rest of the week. I don't have one today, but every day the rest of the week.